Hey guys, I topped today with EXOSISTERs. They got some new support in the in Dimension Force and some new support coming up, so it might be worth learning this deck. So let's get into this deck profile. So for EXOSISTERs, we have 3 Stella. She gives you a special summon from hand. When you normal summon her, she has the effect on field to special summon from hand. 3 Ellis. When you control an EXOSISTER, she special summons from hand, so you can use these two to get a lot of EXOSISTERs out. 3 Sophia. If you control an EXOSISTER, you draw a card. And then 2 Irene. She's the worst one. If you can put an EXOSISTER card from your hand on the bottom of your deck and then draw one. So you do need a critical mass of EXOSISTERs, which is why I still play 2 Irene, but you kind of don't really want to draw her. So then we have our Rhoda, 3 EXOSISTER packs. This just grabs any EXOSISTER card. It could be a monster or a spell or the trap. And if you grab a monster and the other EXOSISTER that's named on it is on the battlefield or in the graveyard, you get to special summon it. So the EXOSISTERs are paired up. You have Stella and Ellis both mention each other, and Irene and Sophia mention each other. So for example, if I have a Stella on field and I pax for an Ellis, I get to special summon her. And all their effects also gain you 800 life points when they see their other one. Packs and all the spells and traps cost 800, so packs cost 800. We have 3 Armament. This one can only be activated on your opponent's turn, but you target an EXOSISTER and you XYZ with them. And it can also be activated on your own turn if they control a monster special summon from graveyard. And I'm playing 3 mostly because drawing it going first isn't that bad, and if they do have a monster special summon from graveyard, it can be a great way to dodge Veiler or Imperm, just because you XYZ your EXOSISTER out of there, or just as an extender. I ended up siding it out a lot. I think once we get better cards, or if there's harder callouts you need to make for the meta, you can trim these numbers. 1 Carpe Diem. This one is just kind of there as an additional search target. It lets you, it protects you against Nibiru. The actual effect is neither player can target EXOSISTER monsters with effects of monsters special summon from graveyard. That can vary in effect, but the main point is when you XYZ, you get to prohibition something for a turn. And then when you declare an attack with an EXOSISTER, when an attack is declared involving an EXOSISTER, you get to pop a spell or trap. So sometimes this can be useful, especially in back row decks. 2 Vetus. This is a really strong trap. What it does is you special summon, you pay 800, and then you special summon an EXOSISTER and the one that pairs with them from deck. It has to be both. It actually came up for me today that I had too many EXOSISTERs banished that I couldn't summon a pair. And then they get shuffled back into the deck at the end phase, and you also can't special summon anything but EXOSISTER monsters from the extra deck. So you could play this at 3. Honestly, it's not that bad to draw, and it is a way to go into your plays if they don't, if you aren't forced to pop it on their turn, because with 2 of them you can XYZ and then start doing things. I decided to play 2 because I don't really want to draw my trap card that much, just because it can be a bit slow, especially if you're going second. But this does, you generally want to search this out during your combo, and we can go over combos in a bit. Because if you're able to chain this to an effect that removes a card from the graveyard, it can be a huge blowout and win games. And then we have generic rank 4 extenders. I'm playing 3 Phantom Knight Shade Brigandine and 1 ZS Ascended Sage. This could be any combination of level 4s that special summon from hand. Some people play Gigabyte. This is just what I happen to have on hand. Also 1 Monster Reborn. Pretty versatile. You since you're going to XYZs and detaching, you can use them as extender. You can also just bring back an XYZ and make your in archetype F0. We'll go over that in the extra deck. 1 Called By. Called By is good. I'm playing the 2 Pot of Desires because we do want some form of card draw, and we don't usually mind Desires that much. We do in fact need our extra deck. You could potentially get away with Extravagance, but we use a lot of the extra deck, so that's pretty risky. For hand traps, 3 Veiler, 3 Ash, 2 DD Crow, 2 Ghost Ogre, and I'm also playing 2 Forbidden Chalice. Just generic interaction. This is kind of just what I expected to be good in the current meta. Obviously, these could all be changed for other pieces of interaction. The main interaction to note is that once the next support comes out, DD Crow gets even better because you can use it to trigger Malfa, but that isn't a thing yet. So now we should talk about the extra decks. So 3 Michaelis, she's the best one. When they all have an effect that they gain for the turn that they're XYZ summoned. Michaelis' effect is when she's XYZ summoned, she gets the effect for the turn to quick effect banish something your opponent controls or in graveyard. So, getting rid of a card is very good. It's your main form of interaction. And then on your own turn, she can also detach to search an Exorcist spell or trap. So this is how you're going to search out Vadis usually. 2 Caspatel. You could potentially play 3 just because she is really integral to the combo. When she's summoned, if she's XYZ summoned, neither player can special summon from the graveyard this turn. And then her second effect is to detach and add an Exosister monster from your deck to your hand. So usually if you have like 2 Exosisters and like an extender, you can go into Caspatel and get Ellis, and then Ellis special summons from hand as an additional summon for an additional XYZ. 2 Jabreen. Jabreen has the effect that when she's XYZ summoned with an Exosister, she becomes an effect veiler, a monster negate for the turn. And you can also detach one to make all your XYZs this turn have 800 more attack. And that's kind of a continuous effect, so it's fine if you XYZ after that as well. Playing 2, just since the extra monster negate is a useful piece of interaction on the opponent's turn, so I might go through one and need another. 1 Asophiel. Her effect is she's a symmetric Abyss Dweller. When she's XYZ summoned, neither player can activate effects in graveyard. And this is very good against, for example, the 10E package. And then you can also detach one to bounce a monster that your opponent controls. That came up once. It's basically like, these are all once per turn, so if you need 2 pieces of removal, you can use Michaelis to banish one and Asophiel to bounce one. That's when it becomes useful. And then the new card, Exosister Magnifica. So this one requires some explanation. So you make this with 2 Exosisters XYZs. So let's say you have Asophiel and Jabreen. You XYZ them together and you make Magnifica. Now she has once per turn quick effect, detach to non-target banish. And that can out things like Avramax came up today. She can make 2 attacks a turn, which is pretty big for OTKing because she's 28. So you can often go through Jabreen, boost up everyone by 800, attack for 36 twice, and then just have something else on the field. And then she also has the effect that when your opponent activates a card or effect, you can return a material to the extra deck, and then XYZ summon that thing using Magnifica as material. So the basic combo will end on Magnifica with, say, Michaelis and Caspatel as material. So you can use Caspatel as a banish, detach for banish, and then when your opponent tries to do anything, you chain Magnifica's effect to swap her out for Michaelis. Now Michaelis was XYZ. It's treated as an XYZ summon, so now you have Michaelis's banish of something that they do. And then on your next turn, you just detach Magnifica to search for packs or a combo starter or something. Now we have generics. I'm running a Time Thief Redoer because I'm running the Shade Brigandine package. He's just a pretty good 4-star. Baguska in case I see Flunderies. Zeus because Zeus. I'm running a Nightmare Phoenix. The main point of this is just to out Contact C, because otherwise I have no outs. And then 1 Infinitrack Fortress Megaclops, because just sometimes decks can't deal with that. And since we put out so many XYZs, it's very possible to make it. Other considerations are Gaga Gaga Magician. And I would actually recommend that with the Infinitrack, because it makes it a lot easier to make it, because you just make, say on turn 3, you make Gaga Gaga, and you bring back an XYZ, and then if you have another XYZ, you just go into Infinitrack. Side deck. So just some additional hand traps. We have 2 Nibiru, because a lot of decks fold to Nibiru, and 1 Droll and Lockbird. I was trying to find a medium zone where I wouldn't just hard lose the Flunderies, since they aren't obstructed by the moving cards out of graveyards at all, basically. They just have the banish effect. And so I have this Droll in here for them, but, it could be a third nib. Back row interaction, I'm on 2 Twister, 1 Duster. Carpe Diem kind of gives us a way to interact with back row already, so I didn't feel like I needed to go super hard on it. So this is enough to out Floodgates, because this deck does fold a bit to Rivalry when they're going second, because all the main deck monsters are spellcasters and all the extra deck ones are warriors. And then TC Boo, because you need 2 spellcasters to make your first XYZ. I'm playing 2 Grave of the Super Ancient Organism as a Floodgate that stops Despias, and 1 Dimensional Barrier. For the same reason, the reason I'm going with this ratio is kind of split the difference on going first versus going second. I don't have intrinsic ways to protect my Floodgates, so I would still prefer the Dimensional Barrier going first. But you know, you are going to go second sometime, and I think Dimensional Barrier is kind of bad when you're going second. And then we have 3 Gozen match. All of my monsters are light, except for some of the generics. Like, I can even go into Zeus under Gozen. It's insane. And then 3 Secret Village of the Spellcasters. Don't run this card. It was awful. I just wanted to test it. Play something else. Okay, so basic combo is if you have, say, some EXOSISTER cards. Like, let's say if you have a really cracked hand. You have Stella, Ellis, Sophia, and let's say you already have Vetus in hand or something like that. So Stella and Ellis plus EXOSISTERs is going to be a way into your plays, just because these are your ways to get extra bodies on board. But you can go normal summon Stella, activate her effect to special summon Sophia, and you activate Sophia's effect to get a draw card. Then, because you control EXOSISTERs, you special summon Ellis. And then you can overlay into Michaelis. Michaelis detaches one of them to find a EXOSISTER spell or trap. So what you're going to do is you find Pax, and then you're going to use Pax, and since Sophia's in your graveyard, you can special summon Irene, and now you just overlay them into, say, whatever's useful on your opponent's turn, because you might be able to go into it with Magnifica. So, you know, if you know you're against Tenyiz, you might go into a Sophiel. Otherwise, normal is Caspatel. Then you can detach, search a starter for next turn. You don't really have 1-card starters, but it helps to have more EXOSISTERs in hand. So usually Stella, and then you just overlay this into Michaelis. Sorry, not Michaelis. Magnifica. And now, what do you have on your opponent's turn? You set Vetus, and what you have is that double banish that we talked about before. But say they try and do literally anything with their graveyard. You flip Vetus, you bring in either pair, but let's just say Stella and Ellis. Say you chain to an effect, right? So, for example, one of my opponents today tried to use Baron effect to special summon from graveyard. Chain Vetus, bring out these 2. Now the Baron special summons from graveyard, you can trigger their effects to XYZ. So all of the main deck monsters have the effect that if your opponent moves a card out of the graveyard, then you get to XYZ with them. So then on this turn, we can go Jabreen. And then if we wanted to use, say, Caspatel's effect, we could have Michaelis. So now what we have is... Why do I have a Michaelis here? I'm sorry. This should be a Magnifica. So now what we have is a monster negate, a banish, a non-target banish, and then once we use that non-target banish, we can also swap that into here and disallow summoning from the extra deck. Or sorry, summoning from the graveyard. Or a variety of other things, like activating effects in graveyard. So yeah, that does it for some of the basic lines of play. And I think it's definitely a meta call. It depends on how well your opponents can actually play around the effect to not special summon from grave, because getting free XYZ summons can really easily lead you to floodgating a lot of their effects. And then you can close out the game with Jabreen plus Magnifica. So yeah, give the deck a try.